Make sure to like and subscribe if you believe respect is not about what someone does, but what they have been through. Especially for the men and women who wore the uniform with pride, even when the world forgot their names. He walked those halls like a shadow, quiet, invisible, and mostly ignored. Every morning, before the first cadet even rubbed the sleep out of his eyes, the old man in the gray custodial uniform had already clocked in. No name tag, just a silent badge of age and dignity. The creases in his face, the tired bend in his spine, and that faded ball cap with the word retired stitched above a patch that only a few bothered to notice. Most did not even look. At the West Burbridge Military Training Academy, excellence was expected, and arrogance was the unofficial language. Recruits came from polished suburbs and military lineages, kids with clean records and cleaner boots, ready to command before they could even salute properly. They strutted through the corridors with bravado like they were auditioning for history. And him, he was just the janitor, the guy who scrubbed their boot prints off the marble floor and emptied the trash that held the coffee cups fueling their egos. Some of them mocked him, not all, but enough. They would nudge each other when he passed, cracking jokes loud enough for him to hear. One called him Sergeant Mop. Another asked if he had gotten lost on the way to the Veterans Affairs Hospital. They thought it was funny. They thought he was harmless. And because he never responded, because he just kept pushing that broom with the same calm rhythm day after day, they mistook his silence for shame. But it was not shame. It was something else. Something they did not yet understand. One morning, about a week before the Academy's prestigious annual symposium, it got worse. The cafeteria was buzzing with late breakfast chatter when one of the more brash recruits, a second-year cadet named Landon, all swagger and southern charm, deliberately knocked over his tray as the old man walked by. Eggs, toast, and orange juice hit the ground like a mission gone sideways. Oops. Landon grinned loud enough for the room to hear. Looks like we got a mess, soldier. The way he said soldier made. Everyone snickered. The old man did not react. He looked out at the mess, nodded slowly, and began to clean. Not a word, not a glance. The room got louder after that, confidence inflated by cruelty. Other cadets added to the pile, crumpled napkins, spilled coffee. One even dropped a banana peel like it was some kind of cartoon skit. And through it all, the old man moved carefully, deliberately, as if the chaos did not faze him, as if he had seen far worse. Because he had, but they did not know that. To them, he was just background noise. A man with a broom in a building full of stars and stripes, forgotten by the institution he might have once served. And maybe that is what stung the most. How easily people forget. How quickly they move on when the cameras stop rolling. When the parades end and the medals are tucked away in drawers. How a man can dedicate his whole life to a country only to be dismissed as an afterthought by its future defenders. No one ever asked his name. No one wondered why he walked with a slight limp or why he sometimes stared a little too long at the wall where the Academy kept its wall of honor, portraits of great leaders, brave men and women who had changed history with courage and sacrifice. Every now and then, his eyes would rest on one particular photo in that hallway. A black and white image of a young officer saluting in the middle of a sandstorm, just swirling around him like war's fingerprint. He would pause there just long enough for his breathing to steady, then he would move on. That week, the disrespect seemed to intensify, like the whole place was building towards something. Maybe it was the symposium. Maybe it was nerves. Or maybe it was just how easy it is for people to gang up on the quiet ones when no one is watching. One night, someone even left a fake application on his janitor card. It was a printout from a prank website, application for senior custodial commander. Under skills, someone had scribbled mop foo and advanced trash deployment. Again, no reaction. He folded it once, put it in his pocket, and continued his work. But what they did not see, what they never imagined, was that the old man never needed their approval. Because a long time ago, in places none of them had ever seen, he had earned something far more sacred than their shallow applause, something they could not recognize because they had not lived enough life to understand it. The kind of respect that comes not from medals or speeches, but from silence, from sacrifice, and from surviving when others did not. And while they slept, he worked. While they laughed, he remembered. He remembered the names of every soldier who never made it home. He remembered the way sand feels in your teeth when you are under fire, and the way silence rings louder then. Gunfire when the mission ends. He remembered commands, battle maps, and the lives he once led, not just under orders, but with honor. The academy, though decorated in tradition, had forgotten its foundation. In their drive for excellence, they had left humility behind, and no one, not even the instructors, thought to remind them until the day the general walked in. But that is another part of the story. For now, all you need to know is this. They called him a janitor. They laughed. They mocked. And they never thought twice about what he once was. But they were about to learn that real rank is not worn. It is earned. And sometimes it is the quietest man in the room who has lived the loudest life. It was the morning of the symposium, an event that had been circled in red on every cadet's calendar for weeks. Suits pressed, boots shined, medals polished to a mirror shine. The Academy's grand assembly hall, usually reserved for formal ceremonies and visiting dignitaries, buzzed with tension. This was no ordinary event. This year, they were told a decorated four-star general, General Marcus Denning himself, would be delivering the keynote. A man known for leading elite missions across 4 continents and mentoring some of the most successful officers of the last decade. To say people were nervous would be an understatement. The cadets filled the rows with stiff posture and eyes wide, straightening their uniforms for the 5th or 6th time. Officers flanked the sides of the room, each one with a clipboard or a radio, making sure everything was perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Outside that polished room, just minutes before the event, the old janitor moved down the hallway with his cart. Same as always, same slow shuffle, same broom leaning against the side. But this morning, he was moving slower than usual. He paused at the end of the corridor, adjusting the brim of his retired cap, then looked out toward the ceremony hall where voices were echoing and chairs were being arranged. His gaze lingered. Back inside, the room fell silent as the double doors swung open and General Denning entered. Now, Denning was not a man you could ignore. Tall, broad, and calm like a storm you knew better than to provoke. He carried himself with the gravity of someone who had witnessed history firsthand and helped write it. Everyone stood. Salutes snapped in unison. Cameras clicked. The general nodded once, his face unreadable. But instead of heading toward the podium like expected, Denning did something strange. He kept walking, right past the brass, past the commandants, past the row of cadets staring straight ahead, and straight toward the man standing in the hallway. Every eye followed him. Every conversation hushed into stunned silence. And then it happened. General Denning stood before the janitor, looked him square in the eyes, and saluted. A full formal salute. No one moved. No one dared move. And then the general spoke, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for those closest to hear, which was enough for word to spread like wildfire in that oxygen-tight room. Sir, it is an honor to finally meet you in person. Gasps rippled through the back row. A few heads turned sharply. One cadet's mouth fell open. Sir, he called him sir. The janitor blinked slowly, and for the first time anyone had ever seen, he returned the salute, not with any dramatic flair, but with the quiet precision of a man who had done it thousands of times before, in places where doing it wrong might cost lives. General Denning turned to the room, cleared his throat, and said, "Before I begin my speech, I want to recognize someone in this building who shaped more lives than I ever could. Someone who led men into battle long before many of you were even born. A man whose leadership, strategy, and sacrifice saved my life and the lives of 212 other soldiers during Operation Goliath." Murmurs erupted in the back rows. Operation Goliath. That was supposed to be top secret. Still barely declassified. Denning continued. His name is not carved into stone here. There are no wings or halls named after him, but there should be. You know him as the janitor. I knew him as Commander Elias Rower. It was like the air got sucked out of the room. Some cadets looked confused. Others looked horrified. Landon, the same cadet who had dropped that tray days earlier, was frozen in place, his face pale. Rower. The janitor's last name was Rower. That name had echoed through the halls of classified briefings and military folklore for years. An officer so deeply embedded in black ops and covert missions that most of his career had been scrubbed from the books. Some thought he was a myth. Others knew better. General Denning looked back at Elias and spoke directly to him. Now, sir, I have waited years for this moment. You saved us. You sacrificed more than anyone ever asked you to. And now these cadets, the future of our military, They deserve to know who you really are. Elias did not smile. He did not puff his chest or clear his throat. He simply nodded, as if he had been expecting this moment, not because he wanted it, but because eventually the truth always surfaces. The cadets did not know what to do. Half of them were still standing. Some sat down. A few were looking at each other, piecing together the times they had mocked him, ignored him, treated him like furniture. It hit like a punch to the gut. And then, just as quietly as he had entered, Elias stepped forward. He did not need a microphone. He did not need a spotlight. But the general insisted, would you share something with them, sir? Denning asked. Elias hesitated, then looked across the room at the students who judged him, the instructors who had not stopped them, and the walls that once told a version of history without him in it. And finally, he said, I will speak, not for me, but for the ones who never made it home. And just like that, the room that once mocked behind his back went absolutely silent, ready to listen. He stood there quietly for a moment, scanning the room. You could hear a pin drop. Cadets who once rolled their eyes at him were now hanging on his every breath. And Elias Rower, the so-called janitor, took one small step forward and began to speak. I have seen young men crumble under pressure. I have seen leaders fall, not because they were not strong, but because they lacked humbleness. I came back home not with pride in my chest, but with shadows in my heart. I did not return to be celebrated. I came here to stay close to what I loved, even if the world had ignored me. He did not cry. He did not raise his voice. He just told the truth, the kind you do not learn in books or drills. He spoke of the mission no one talked about, of the soldiers whose names were never printed on programs, and of the price of leadership when the bullets stopped flying and the memories remain. Some cadets began to wipe their eyes. Even instructors shifted uncomfortably, realizing their own silence had allowed the disrespect to grow unchecked. And then he stopped. No grand finale, no applause request, just silence. But what followed was something no one expected. The cadet who had spilled that tray, the loudest, most arrogant of them all, stood up, chest tight with shame. He looked Rower in the eye and said, Sir, I am sorry. I did not know, but that is no excuse. Rower gave him a small nod. Nothing more. And then another cadet stood, and another. Soon, the entire room, every last one of them, rose to their feet. They did not clap. They saluted one by one in complete silence. 200 future officers stood in honor of the man they had once overlooked. General Denning did not interrupt. He simply stepped aside. And in that moment, Elias Rower, quiet, humble, forgotten, was not just respected. He was remembered. He turned without a word, walked slowly back down the corridor, and disappeared around the corner with his old push broom like nothing had ever happened. Respect is not about a title. It is not a uniform. It is not even about a war story. It is about how you carry yourself when no one is watching, and how you treat those who carry the weight of sacrifice. If you believe no veteran should ever be forgotten, hit that like button and share this story so the world remembers the quiet heroes walking among us every